From the virtual newsroom of ImpactAlpha, this is your Impact Briefing for Friday, February 26th. I'm Monique Aiken. Today, I'm joined by ImpactAlpha reporter Roodgally Senatus to learn more about Bitwise Industries' ecosystem model in Fresno, California, and soon, Toledo, Ohio. Hey, Rudy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Monique.
And we'll hear from Donnel Baird, founder of BlocPower, this week's Agent of Impact. But first, here's what you need to know from the week in impact investing. Emerging market impact fundraising took a hit last year, but seed stage investments were a rare bright spot as investors see the pandemic accelerating trends in fintech, health tech, and ed tech, as well as the digitization of virtually every business. In India, startup funding was down 10%, but seed stage funding rose to about $400 million from about $250 million in 2019. In Nigeria, 60% of the deals were in pre-seed and seed stage rounds. In the US, neighborhood trusts are becoming a way to build community wealth and to hold off speculation that drives gentrification and displacement. ImpactAlpha wrote about the Kensington Corridor Trust in Philadelphia and the Guild in Atlanta. The trusts hold the properties so local residents and businesses can determine the community's needs and participate in the dividends and wealth appreciation. The Impact Assets 50 list is now in its 10th year, so a lot of the bigger fund managers are familiar. What might be new to some listeners is the Emerging 41, a separate list of newer and smaller fund managers. Those are outfits like Apis and Heritage Capital Partners, which supports transitions to employee ownership, and Open Road Alliance, which provides bridge loans to social entrepreneurs facing what they call OMG moments. Of course, ImpactAlpha readers already knew about all of them. And there's lots of green action in Sweden. A foundation tied to the furniture giant IKEA is backing the Swedish company H2 Green Steel, which is producing carbon-free steel using so-called green hydrogen. And Modvion, another Swedish company, isn't waiting for green steel. Instead, they're building wooden wind turbine towers. The corporate VC arm of Vestas, a Danish wood turbine company, made its first investment in Modvion. The wooden towers are said to be lower carbon, easier to transport, and more cost-efficient than steel. You can read all of these stories and more at ImpactAlpha.com. Rudy, welcome. It's nice to have you here with us.
Thank you for having me, Monique. Happy to be here.
So why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more for our listeners, since this is your first time here?
Yes. So I am ImpactAlpha's New York-based reporter. I was an intern with the company when I was in school, and I left back in 2019 to go cover commercial real estate for a year, and now I'm back covering deal flow.
And where are you from?
Oh my gosh, that's a question I always pause to answer because I'm like, should I say Haiti or Brooklyn?
Both. You wrote
Okay.
this week about Bitwise Industries and their $50 million capital raise. What are they up to?
Yes, I did. And, you know, Monique, if you want to go to Fresno, California, it would be pretty easy to see what they're up to. I mean, they renovated old downtown buildings and warehouses and created technology hubs in farm cities like Fresno, Bakersfield, and Merced. And now they're taking that model to Toledo, Ohio, and other cities across the country.
And how do they deliver on impact?
They actually do three things and tie them up together to make it all work. They're an apprenticeship and training program to get locals ready for tech industry jobs in places that haven't gotten the economic lift from the tech boom. They've trained over 5,000 folks in the Fresno area and helped them get jobs in the tech industry. And what I find really interesting about their platform is that they actually pay the students to learn. And what that does, it creates a talent pool and that lets tech companies move to places like Fresno. And then those companies rent office space from Bitwise. And, they also run their own tech consulting businesses. They partner with government agencies and other organizations, which provide work for some of the apprentices and trainees that they have in their program.
So how'd the deal come together?
K4 Capital out in Oakland is the lead investor. They also invested in the company's Series A back in June 2019. Their investment thesis, investing in companies that close gaps of access for low-income communities and or communities of color. As you know, Mitch Kapor was a tech pioneer. Some people might be old enough to remember the Lotus 1, 2, 3 spreadsheet. And he told me about the Bitwise team and how much he liked them, and that Jake and Irma had cracked the code on economic development in cities that have not been part of the tech ecosystem, where there's a lot of inequality of income and wealth. Here's Mitch.
And so going to Fresno and spending time with them and meeting the students in the academy and meeting the apprentices and seeing the co-working space and who was there and the events that they ran and how they had really fostered a whole tech ecosystem where there was none. And as part of it had created high-paying jobs and filled them with people from Fresno who were not in the tech ecosystem at all. They brought them along first through exposure and then through classes and then apprenticeships and then hiring. And they had wrapped this all in a business model that was going to make money. It was the totality of all of those things experienced, at a kind of a visceral level by being in Fresno. And I said, oh, these are people we really want to get to know. These are the kinds of founders we really want to back.
And Cape Horn Capital has been super active lately.
Yes, they have. They were in a funding round for a fintech called Promise, which is helping low-income people pay essential bills and dues to governments, like ticket fines and other dues. They're also backing BlocPower, the Brooklyn company that raised $63 million to restore city buildings and underserved communities and give them kind of a green retrofit. I caught up with CEO of BlocPower, Donnel Baird, who is this week's Agent of Impact. Here's what he said.
I think that growing up poor and without access to clean energy or adequate energy for heating and cooling, it just helped me understand the insight that, in low-income communities, there's two kinds of waste. There's a waste of energy because of the inefficient or inadequate heating systems. The neglected kind of heating and cooling systems waste energy. And then there's a waste of all the human potential of the people that live in the community because they aren't being connected to jobs or resources or education that's appropriate.
Donnel told me how frustrating the fundraising process was, and especially from so-called impact investors who he thought would understand his platform. Eventually he turned to Wall Street and Silicon Valley investors to raise capital for the Series A.
I'll give you a quick example. I went in and talked to an impact investor, and they told me that in order to invest money in my company, they would need to charge me 17% interest rate.
Wow.
So I said, well, I thought you're an impact investor. I thought your capital comes from a hyper net worth individual social and environmental impact, not just financial returns. How can you possibly justify a 17% interest rate for installing solar panels and energy efficiency in low-income buildings? You're going to charge us 17%? He's like, yeah, that's what it is, right? So for us, at a certain point, we had to say, oh, okay, maybe the impact investing thing isn't for us. So we're going to go out to Silicon Valley and now Wall Street, and we're going to raise our capital from there. So that's what we did.
Thanks for joining us today, Rudy.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
And you could read more about BlocPower in Rudy's profile of Donnel on ImpactAlpha. And that's going to do it for your Impact Briefing this week. You can read all of these stories at ImpactAlpha.com. ImpactAlpha's podcasts are available wherever you listen, made possible by ImpactAlpha subscribers. Join them and receive the daily brief and full access to ImpactAlpha.com and more. Podcast listeners can get $100 off their annual subscription. Go to ImpactAlpha.com/subscribe and use the code BRIEFING100 for $100 off. And thank you for listening. Thanks to Rudy and our producer, Isaac Silk. I'm Monique Aiken, Managing Director for TIP, the Investment Integration Project. Make sure to check back for next week's briefing. And until then, take care.